For decades, Barbara Mandrell seemed to have it all. Major awards, hit songs, and a public image built on charm and wholesomeness. By the time of her 2009 Country Music Hall of Fame induction, after a glittering 38-year career and over 75 industry awards, Mandrell was immortalized in the Nashville Museum as a legendary figure who was country when country wasn't cool. Fans remember the sparkle, sequined dresses, energetic dance numbers, flawless harmonies with her sisters. But behind Mandrell's radiant public persona lay a hidden life of pain, sacrifice, and sudden tragedy that few ever saw. This is the story of Barbara Mandrell's double life, the whispered struggles and secrets that played out behind the scenes of her picture-perfect career. The birth of a prodigy. Barbara Ann Mandrell was born on Christmas Day 1948 in Houston, Texas, into a family already steeped in music. Her father, Herbie Mandrell, was a country guitarist who ran a music store. Her mother, Mary Ellen, taught music and piano. By the time little Barbara was in first grade, Herbie had taught her to play the accordion and read music. The family moved to California, and by age 10, Barbara was adding saxophone lessons to her training. When she was just 11, country star Joe Mathis spotted her performing on steel guitar at a trade show and invited her onto his Las Vegas show. Soon Mandrell was playing military bases with the family band, touring with Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline in 1962, and becoming a bona fide prodigy. In 1967, fresh out of high school, Mandrell married Ken Dudney, the family band's drummer, and briefly retired from performing. But she was never long content to be a listener in the audience. When Dudney was reassigned as a Navy pilot, Barbara told her father, "Daddy, I can do that," about a Grand Ole Opry show, and Herbie famously replied, "I'd bet my last penny on you." By 1969, she had signed with Columbia Records, and her hit-making career was underway. Songs like the randy "If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right" and the playful "Sleeping Single in a Double Bed" made her a chart topper, and her crossover flair, a country singer unafraid of a little pop and R&B, won her fans far beyond Music City. In one American songwriter's list of classic country artists, Mandrell is praised for taking country's traditional perspective and adding a dose of disco-era glitz. By the mid-1970s, Mandrell had become one of country's biggest stars. She was the first female artist to headline her own tour and to book her own opening acts, shattering the pretty little girl singer opening for a man stereotype. She learned to sing and play practically anything in the band: guitar, banjo, steel guitar, accordion, saxophone, and she danced vigorously on stage, often with a troupe of male backup dancers. "We worked so hard and spent so much money on her live show," Mandrell recalled, because she wanted to make every tour bigger than the last. The result was a singer at the top of her game. Between 1978 and 1980, she won Entertainer of the Year at the CM Awards twice in a row, a feat unheard of for a woman at the time, and earned a People's Choice Favorite All-Around Female Entertainer Award every year from 1982 to 1987. The cost of the glamour. On stage, Barbara Mandrell beamed with confidence. Off-stage, she was driven and anxious to maintain that success. She and her father-manager rehearsed for weeks before each tour. "Every year I'd take 6 weeks with my band, crew, and choreographer to put a new show together. We'd spend 8 hours per day, 7 days per week, putting a show together to beat last year's show," she recalled. Her shows were feats of stamina. She sang, danced, and multitasked on a parade of instruments. In the male-dominated industry, she saw herself as a competitor who had to work twice as hard. As Mandrell once told The Boot, "Men dominated the world of country music, but I looked around and discovered there were more women than you might have thought," including herself, a tireless performer who even choreographed routines and insisted on gospel songs in her set to reflect her faith. In 1980, Mandrell finally got a national variety show on NBC, Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters, co-starring younger sisters Louise and Erlene. The program proved wildly popular. At its peak, it drew some 40 million viewers each week. In the show, Barbara often played the serious, pushy sister in comedy sketches, the only one of the trio to dance with backup dancers, proving she was unlike the typical country belle image the network wanted. Mandrell later admitted that when she heard NBC executives pushing for more rural gimmicks, hay bales on stage, etc., she fought back. She even insisted on including gospel music on the show, because everything I have comes from Him. It was part of her genuine persona. In interviews, she always emphasized her Christian faith, country roots, and devotion to family. But behind the crew lights of that stage, the show was breaking Mandrell's body. The non-stop schedule of headlining tours plus a weekly TV series was exhausting her. By late 1982, she made a quietly shocking announcement. At just 33 years old, she was canceling her TV series. "I had to quit because of my health," Mandrell later said bluntly. Rehearsals and performances were taking a visible toll on her famous honey-coated voice, she explained, and enduring 40 million viewer variety shows alongside tours was grinding her down. It was an admission fans didn't expect from their ever-cheerful superstar. Rather than publicly blame the schedule or admit fatigue, Mandrell simply withdrew. She never elaborated much on the specifics. Her statement to The Boot mentioned only that the show's long hours were taking a toll on my voice. In retrospect, this was an early sign of the pressures that would soon crash down on her. By 1984, Mandrell was still smiling for the cameras, but she was struggling. Hoarse, at concerts, and secretly worried about losing her voice. In a way, her life had become a double act. A dazzling performer on stage and a worried woman behind the scenes, determined not to let anyone see how close to the edge she was. The crash on September 11, 1984. That pressure exploded one night in September 1984. It was a calm evening near her Nashville home when fate intervened. Barbara Mandrell was driving home with her two eldest children, Matthew, age 14, and Jamie, age 8. After an outing, without warning, a car driven by a 19-year-old college student, Mark White, crossed the center line and rammed head-on into Mandrell's vehicle. In an instant, the entire course of her life changed. News reports at the time described Mandrell's condition as critical. Her Jaguar was crushed like an accordion, witnesses said. Mandrell herself was left with life-threatening injuries. According to KBOE radio, Mandrell suffered a broken leg, a concussion, and numerous cuts in the wreck. She required immediate surgery at Nashville's Baptist Hospital to stabilize a fractured femur and shattered ankle. Remarkably, her two children survived with only minor injuries. But on the other side of the collision, 19-year-old Mark White was killed instantly. For weeks, Mandrell's situation hovered between life and death. The accident inflicted a gruesome tally of trauma. She shattered her right femur, fractured an ankle in 4 places, broke toes and ribs, and suffered a concussion so severe that doctors warned it was unclear if she would ever be the same. Her forehead took some of the impact and required 40 stitches. In all, she would undergo dozens of surgeries, especially on her femur and ankle, stretching out over many months. Throughout this ordeal, Mandrell's public face never cracked. In an appearance just days after the crash, at the 1984 Country Music Association Awards, she gamely joined the other nominees on stage. Spokesman Review reported that she even had to read her lines off cue cards because, at that time, her head injury caused her to stutter if she tried to talk off the cuff. To the vast majority of fans tuning in, Barbara looked competent and brave. They had no way of knowing just how much she was hiding. Behind the scenes, the gravity of the crash rippled through her inner circle. Her family and management wrestled with fear and disbelief, unsure if she would survive the night. The shock of losing another life in the accident, the young driver, so close in age to her own children, added a layer of guilt and grief Mandrell had never experienced before. The media, while sympathetic, could only capture fragments, photographs of the crushed car, brief hospital updates, and quotes from spokespeople carefully controlling the narrative. Yet those fragments, could never convey the true terror of the hours spent waiting, the whispered prayers in hospital corridors, or the quiet anguish behind Barbara's composed appearances. Even her children, too young to fully comprehend the danger they had been in, sensed the tension and fragility, creating a household that suddenly felt like it teetered on the edge of loss. In a single night, Mandrell's life and her perception of safety, fame, and control had been irrevocably altered. Recovering from the crash. Once the dust settled, Mandrell's fight to recover would prove even more grueling than the crash itself. In the weeks following the accident, she awoke again and again from surgeries to agonizing pain. Her father, Irby, later described the scene at her bedside. Barbara would strain to move her leg, trying to exceed what her knee will do, trying to make it do its full thing again. Every day, she pushed herself to work her joints a bit farther. It was grueling, excruciating work to regain basic mobility. Many evenings she lay in agony, wondering if she'd ever walk or perform normally again. The physical injuries were evident. X-ray and X-rays and doctors' reports from the time paint a picture of devastation. Mandrell's broken femur and ankle required plates, rods, and more. The damage was so bad that one journalist writing later listed every injury as if delivering a death sentence. Broken femur, shattered ankle, injured knee, a serious head injury, and even noted that these injuries temporarily altered her personality. While in the hospital, she could barely walk, and in later interviews, Mandrell confessed, "I never thought I would ever sing again or be Barbara Mandrell again, or any of that. The most basic tasks of life felt impossible. How could I take care of myself? I can't eat and I can't walk," she told her husband Ken, uncertain how she could ever raise a child at that point. Even after coming home, she needed help for weeks just to dress and shower. Though the visible scars slowly healed, the pain lingered. Doctors said it would take over a year for her knee to function fully. And even after that, Mandrell admitted she still felt agony in her ankle every day. The physical strain was compounded by a deep depression. A Country Music Hall of Fame biography notes that the endless surgeries and months of immobility led to prolonged pain and depression. In quiet moments, Barbara would cry at the prospect that her career might be over. Her identity was so entwined with performing that she could scarcely imagine life without it. Yet, she never complained publicly. Behind her dimpled smile and gracious thank yous, the superstar was enduring a private hell. Mandrell's fear was not unfounded. By law, she was required to file a multi-million-dollar lawsuit over the crash, further complicating matters. Under Tennessee's insurance regulations, she had to sue the family of the deceased driver, Mark White's parents, in order to collect from her own insurance company. It was a cruel technicality. Barbara reluctantly signed off on a $10.3 million damage suit against the family of the young man whose car had crossed the line. The White family had suffered enough, but state law left Mandrell no choice. Her lawyers even called the Whites in advance to explain that Barbara wanted no money from them, only the release she needed from her insurer. But the world would see only the headlines. Barbara Mandrell sues family of crashed teen, something she later said devastated her carefully cultivated image. Effects of the accident on personality, memory, and secrecy. The crash's most insidious injury, however, was hidden behind Barbara's eyes. The concussion she suffered was not a superficial bruise. It was a traumatic brain injury. In the months that followed, Mandrell experienced dramatic and terrifying changes to her cognition and behavior. Side effects she kept mostly private. Her family later recalled that after the accident, Barbara would sometimes forget that she herself was injured. She'd refer to herself in the third person. That was her, she might say of herself, or she did that, as though some stranger was using her body. In her 2003 700 Club interview, Mandrell described the surreal confusion of that time. A change of personality? A reporter asked her about the aftermath. "Oh, totally," she replied. In the grip of the brain injury left her confused, agitated, prone to bouts of ecstasy and rage. As the interviewer later wrote, her moods flipped unpredictably. One moment, she might be laughing helplessly, the next sobbing. The people around her were baffled and frightened. By her own account, she cussed like a sailor for weeks on end. Even ministers who suffer head injuries cuss really bad. She chuckled ruefully in a later TV interview. When she spoke, her speech was often slurred or broken, forcing her to memorize and read every word until she could trust herself to improvise again. All of this was invisible to the public. At award shows and interviews, Barbara showed only the happiest side of herself, poised, thankful, and perfectly composed. If anything, her friendships in the country world even seemed to deepen. Stars like Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson rallied to her side. What fans didn't know was that when the cameras were off, Mandrell could barely recognize herself. Even her own memory of the months after the crash was spotty. "My head injury took about 3 years to fully recover," she told CMT many years later, quietly hinting at just how long the ordeal lasted. She chose not to detail it publicly at the time, keeping the full scope of her trauma to herself. The only clue into her altered state came from one surprising place: the television cameras. In late 1984, less than 3 weeks after the crash, Mandrell attended the CMA Awards on live television. Fans watching could see that she was pale but presentable, but something was off. An article in the Spokesman Review recounts that she was visibly using cue cards to speak, and that her speech had a strange hesitation. Barbara later explained this away by saying her doctors advised her to avoid impromptu speaking for the time being. The show continued to see the smiling star Barbara, but by then, her double life was fully underway. Out front, she was back in the spotlight. In private, she was still barely herself. The fall of the image and scandals in the headlines. As Barbara Mandrell dealt with her broken body and mind in secrecy, the outside world began whispering rumors that would slowly, painfully erode the image she had spent decades cultivating. For weeks, tabloid stories circulated about the lawsuit against the family of the teen driver, Mark White. Stories which often painted her as insensitive, greedy, or opportunistic. Headlines screamed simplifications of a complex tragedy. Barbara Mandrell sues teen's family, country star profits from tragedy, and Mandrell takes legal action against young driver's family. Spokesman Review columnist Jack Hurst later explained the damage succinctly. Fans only saw the headline, rarely the context that Tennessee law required a formal legal proceeding for any claim arising from the crash. The nuances, the clarifications, the explanations that Mandrell and her legal team worked tirelessly to provide were drowned out by sensationalized print. The press was merciless. Mandrell's public image, carefully built over decades of straight-laced interviews, gospel songs, and wholesome family appearances, was splintering before her eyes. For years, she had been celebrated as a paragon of decency and devotion. The friendly smile on stage, the articulate answers in interviews, the unwavering focus on family values. Now that carefully maintained persona seemed brittle, vulnerable to the harsh scrutiny of a public that demanded heroes remain flawless, even in the face of tragedy. Mandrell recounted the aftermath bitterly to Ralph Emery in 1995. Even the people closest to her reacted poorly. "It's still detrimental to me," she said. Her own housekeeper at home, a woman who had supported her through the darkest nights of the accident, was chastised at a Little League game. Another mother reportedly told the housekeeper, "I would never work for such a person as Mandrell." A male friend who had been seen associating with her socially was shunned by golfing buddies for getting close to the singer. The judgment was swift and often cruel, and Mandrell had no way to counter it without revealing too much of her private suffering. Through tearful eyes and gritted teeth, Mandrell went through the motions of the lawsuit. She said her attorneys were told explicitly to reassure the White family that she was not blaming them for Mark's death. Tennessee law simply required the procedure. Yet, to most fans and casual observers, it looked like a betrayal of the family's grief. It looked as though she had turned profit from a tragedy that had left a young life extinguished. The career damage was immediate and tangible. Mandrell later admitted her record sales and concert ticket sales fell off in a big way during the mid-1980s. Radio stations, which had once been eager to spin her songs day after day, became hesitant. Some fans who had cheered her to 2 CMA Entertainer of the Year awards now wrote letters filled with anger, disappointment, or confusion. Even those who had admired her devotion to faith and family questioned her character, and the pressure compounded daily. In an unusually frank on-camera moment, Barbara told Emery, "I'm not blaming the public. Given the information they got through the media, I would have felt the way they felt." Privately, however, she raged at the negligence that had caused the accident, frustrated that one doctor's error had taken a young life. In public, she softened every word, offered apologies for any misunderstanding, and attempted to maintain composure. The contradiction was painful. She was torn between defending herself and protecting the image that fans still cherished. The country music world, which had been quick to forgive peers like Ronnie Millsap or Kenny Rogers when accidents occurred, afforded Mandrell no such grace. It was as though her misfortune magnified her responsibility in the public eye, regardless of the circumstances. This was a profound contradiction to Barbara's cultivated persona. On record, on television, and on stage, she had always been the gentle, devout, family-oriented, good Christian woman who sang about unconditional love, devotion, and moral integrity. Now, suddenly, she was branded a callous, calculating figure in the press, accused of acting in ways utterly at odds with her true character. The dissonance between public perception and private reality deepened the sense of isolation she felt. No wonder she described it as living a double life. By day, the beloved country princess adored by millions. By night, an embattled woman forced to navigate grief, guilt, and the harsh scrutiny of a world that would not pause to understand her. She was defending herself not only legally, but morally, while concealing the full weight of her suffering, her heartbreak, and her fear. The ordeal highlighted an uncomfortable truth about fame. Adoration can be as brittle as glass, and the public is often unforgiving when tragedy collides with celebrity. Mandrell's experience was not just a legal or career setback. It was an emotional trial by fire, one that forced her to confront the fragility of her carefully constructed life. The juxtaposition between the icon adored on stage and the woman grappling with unimaginable loss and scrutiny off stage was stark. It revealed that no amount of talent, charm, or public goodwill could shield her from the harsh, sometimes cruel, judgments of the media and the world. In those months, Barbara Mandrell learned what it truly meant to balance image and reality, a lesson that would echo throughout the rest of her life and career, shaping the resilience and guarded strength that later defined her legacy. Faith, family, and sacrifices. If anything kept Barbara Mandrell going through this roller coaster, it was her family and her faith. A devout Christian, she turned to prayer and scripture for comfort. In the months after the crash, while still in the hospital, she found out something astonishing. She was pregnant with her third child. Doctors feared the baby might not survive, given all the trauma. But Mandrell and her husband Ken prayed through the night. By dawn, an ultrasound showed their unborn son, whom she would come to call her Miracle. Nathan was born in June 1985, a healthy baby whose very survival seemed like a divine sign. Holding him, Barbara whispered thanks and resolution. Her life had been spared for a reason. Once home, Mandrell lived quietly. She sold the family's biggest house, the Fontanelle Mansion, a 27,000-square-foot log cabin estate she had built in 1988 at the height of her fame, opting for something smaller and more private. She painted herself as just a wife and mother to outsiders. In fact, she later told Taste of Country, by the time of her final Opry show on October 23, 1997, she had made up her mind quietly to walk away from the spotlight for good, to focus on being mom. She sold all her instruments except 2 heirlooms, one in the Hall of Fame, to avoid temptation. Those who loved her were told only that Barbara wanted to spend more time with Ken and their children. For all that she sacrificed, Mandrell never once complained in public. After she stepped off the stage for the last time, she retreated into privacy. Interviews dried up. Friends say she focused on raising her kids and her church, occasionally appearing at charity shows or halls of fame ceremonies, but largely refusing offers to try a comeback. In 2009, the Country Music Hall of Fame honored her lifetime achievement. She gave a quietly moving induction speech. Yet still, the only place she says she now sings is on the pew with everybody else in church. Even today, Barbara Mandrell lives a life largely out of sight. As 2025 began, she was 76 years old and had not released a new recording or toured in over 25 years. Fans had almost forgotten the small frame that once held such a big voice. Her surprise appearance on the Grand Ole Opry television special in March 2025, where she watched Kelsea Ballerini sing "I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool" beside her, sent waves of joy through country circles. But for the most part, Mandrell's double life remained quiet. Her legacy of a double life. Barbara Mandrell's story is not one of scandal or tabloid fodder. On the surface, she had none of those. It's a more subtle story of someone who lost more than she won, even as the world cheered. Throughout the 80s, she gave fans exactly what they wanted. Big, upbeat anthems about the fun and heartbreak of love, all served with a radiant smile. Yet under that veneer, she endured private hell. Injuries that should have killed her career, an image that was crushed by misunderstanding, and a career she had to cut off at its peak to save her soul. When Mandrell agreed to be interviewed after 20 years away from the press, she had not been asked about these things much. But in recent years, a few courageous retrospectives, from Taste of Country's Secret History piece to a Nashville TV special, have begun peeling back the layers. They have found the truth that Mandrell herself hinted at in 2002. "Not all of life is an endless parade of accolades," she said. "There is pain. Out of that pain," she insisted, "came a new life and new perspective." She credits her survival and continued grace to her faith. "Even when hard things happen, he's on the throne," she told her 700 Club interviewers, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Indeed, Mandrell seems at peace now with the hidden chapters of her life. She rarely dwells on them, but the proof is in her songs and her silence. On stage, she sang about cheating husbands and church pews. Off stage, she learned the cost of bearing the pain of a nation's adoration. In many ways, Barbara Mandrell's double life was not the thrilling scandal of tabloids, but a deeper, human one. The pressure to always be Barbara Mandrell and never, ever let on how broken she truly was. What makes her story extraordinary is not just survival, but transformation. The accidents and setbacks that could have ended lesser careers became a crucible that forged empathy, depth, and authenticity. Fans may have initially only seen a polished performer, but those who listened closely could detect a quiet strength beneath the melodies. Her legacy is layered. It is at once musical, spiritual, and profoundly human. In retrospect, the cheerful hits and the unspoken suffering are inseparable, creating a portrait of a woman who mastered the art of resilience while remaining authentically herself. The world applauded the public Barbara Mandrell, but the private one, tested, scarred, and steadfast, offers a lesson in enduring dignity and grace that endures far beyond any chart-topping single. Thank you for watching. If any of these revelations about Barbara caught you off guard, be sure to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which hidden details surprised you most. More untold stories from classic Hollywood are on the way.